It was supposed to be a regular weekend, a sacred ritual etched into the calendar of my year. Caleb had pulled into my driveway at the crack of dawn, his old truck groaning under the weight of hunting gear and a cooler filled with snacks we probably didn't need, but brought anyway. The ritual was the same every year. Say a perfunctory goodbye to Bella, load the rifles, and head out for a few days of quiet communion with the woods, a pilgrimage away from the noise of civilization. For me, these hunting trips with Caleb weren't just about the sport, about the patient, silent pursuit of a deer. They were a hard reset, a way to recalibrate my own internal compass. They were an escape from the relentless hum of work stress, the tyranny of phone notifications, and, if I was being honest, Bella's ever-growing, ever-present list of home improvement projects I somehow never quite managed to get to. "Ready to go, Kyle?" Caleb called as he slid his rifle into the bed of his truck. He had this casual, unbothered demeanor that I sometimes envied. Nothing ever seemed to rattle him, not even the ugly, protracted divorce he had gone through a few years back. He just shrugged, cracked a beer, and moved on. Meanwhile, I was the guy who triple-checked everything. Did I pack enough socks? Is the back door locked? Did I say the right thing to Bella? Speaking of Bella, she stood on the porch, a silhouette against the early morning light, wrapped in her favorite silk robe. Her coffee mug was steaming in the chilly air. She didn't come down the steps to hug me goodbye like she usually did, a small but significant break in our own private ritual. She just waved, her lips curving into a faint, polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It was a photograph of a wife saying goodbye, not the real thing. "You sure you'll be okay?" I asked, hesitating by the truck door, a sudden, inexplicable knot of unease tightening in my stomach. Her response was clipped, her voice a little too bright. "Of course. Go. Enjoy yourself. Don't worry about me. Don't worry about me." Asterisk, that's what she said. But something in her tone, a brittle, dismissive edge, made me pause. I chalked it up to my own paranoia, my own tendency to overthink everything. Maybe she was just upset I hadn't gotten around to fixing the leaky faucet in the kitchen. That was probably it. "All right," I said, forcing a grin. "I'll text if I find a signal." She just nodded, turned, and went back inside, the door shutting with a quiet, definitive click behind her. We drove in silence for a while, the familiar hum of the truck's engine the only sound filling the pre-dawn darkness. Caleb, as always, was the first to break the quiet. "You all right, man?" he asked, his eyes on the road. "You're unusually quiet this morning." "Yeah," I said, my voice a little too rough. "Just thinking about Bella. She seemed off." Caleb just shrugged, a gesture of easy, uncomplicated masculinity. "She's probably just glad to have the house to herself for a few days. Women like their space too, you know." I let his words sink in, a plausible, comforting explanation. Maybe he was right. Bella and I had been married for 7 years. And while things weren't perfect, what marriage was, I had always believed we were solid. Sure, there were moments when she seemed distant, distracted by her work, or by something I couldn't quite name. But who didn't have those moments in a marriage? I pushed the unease to the back of my mind and focused on the trip ahead, on the promise of crisp mountain air and the quiet, patient rhythm of the hunt. By the time we reached the cabin, a rustic, charming little place Caleb's family had owned for decades, I was ready to immerse myself in the weekend. Caleb had done a lot of work on the place over the years, transforming it from a dilapidated shack into a cozy, comfortable retreat. "Uncle Bob can't even get around anymore," he said, as he gave me the grand tour, a note of quiet pride in his voice. "But I've made it cozy. Got satellite TV now. Better insulation. Even a new wood stove. The cabin was perfect. We grilled venison steaks for dinner, paired with the cheap, watery beer Caleb insisted was the perfect hunting brew." As the evening wore on, I finally started to relax, the knot of unease in my stomach finally beginning to loosen. And then, Caleb's laptop chimed. He ignored it at first, but the pinging grew more insistent. "Hold on," he muttered, opening the screen. I watched as his face shifted, his expression changing from one of mild curiosity to something else, something that made my stomach twist into a cold, hard knot once more. "Kyle," he said, his voice unusually low, strained. "You need to see this." "What is it?" I asked, walking over. He hesitated, then turned the screen toward me. I blinked, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. It was a picture of Bella, smiling a bright, flirtatious, almost predatory smile. A smile I'd never seen before, the kind of smile she hadn't given me in months. And below it, a caption, asterisk, looking for some fun while my husband's away. Let's connect. Asterisk. The blood drained from my face. Is this some kind of joke? I choked out. Caleb just shook his head, his own face a mask of grim, pained sympathy. I wish it was, man. I think we've got a problem. My mind reeled. This wasn't just some random profile using stolen pictures. The photos, the outfits, the small, intimate details, they were undeniably Bella. My Bella. The woman who had waved me off just that morning. And so began the longest, most surreal weekend of my life. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I just stared at the screen, at the glowing, pixelated image of my wife, as if my sheer disbelief could will it out of existence. But it didn't. Bella's face was right there, her unmistakable smile, the curve of her cheekbones, the small, star-shaped mole just above her lip. She was wearing the silk scarf I'd bought her last Christmas, tied neatly around her neck. Caleb didn't say anything. He just sat across from me at the rough-hewn wooden table, a silent, stoic witness, waiting for me to process what he had clearly already pieced together. This isn't real, I muttered, leaning back, trying to find some logical, rational explanation to cling to. People steal pictures all the time, right? Fake profiles, catfishing. This doesn't mean anything. Caleb sighed, a long, weary sound, and ran a hand through his hair. I thought the same thing, Kyle. I really did. But look at this. He scrolled down, pulling up another picture. Bella again, this time in the yellow sundress I'd gotten her for our anniversary. She was sitting on a patio somewhere, a glass of white wine in her hand, the sun glinting in her hair. I wasn't in the picture. She could have posted this on social media. I argued, my voice thin, desperate, grasping at straws. Someone could have just pulled it off her account. Keep reading, Caleb said, his voice gentle, pointing to the text below the photo. I leaned forward, my eyes squinting at the bio. It felt like someone else was reading the words, not me. Asterisk, alone for the weekend while my husband's on a hunting trip. Looking for someone who matches my type. Dark hair, fit build, Mediterranean features. Let's make this a weekend to remember. Asterisk. My stomach churned. Mediterranean features. Dark hair. Fit build. It was a description of me. She might as well have put my name in there. A strange, twisted, narcissistic detail that made the whole thing feel even more surreal, more sick. This doesn't make sense, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Why would she? I couldn't finish the sentence. Scroll down, Caleb said softly, his voice heavy with a sympathy I didn't want. He was treating me like a bomb that was about to go off, and honestly, he wasn't wrong. The chat logs were worse. Message after message between Bella and a string of anonymous, faceless men. Some were flirtatious. Others were outright explicit. But the one that gutted me, the one that felt like a physical blow, was recent, from earlier that day. A man had responded to her profile, and she had replied, asterisk, I've got the place all to myself. Let's meet Friday night. Can't wait to see you again. Asterisk. Again. That one, simple, four-letter word hit me harder than any of the rest. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This wasn't someone hacking her account. This was Bella, my wife, organizing a tryst in my house, in my bed, while I was away. And it wasn't the first time. Tell me this is fake, I whispered, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew I was just begging for a lie I could no longer believe. Caleb didn't answer. Instead, he clicked on another tab, revealing her full profile. Everything about it was unmistakably her. The way she described her quirky sense of humor, her love of long walks, her obsession with red wine. The details weren't generic. They were Bella. I don't know how long she's been on this site, Caleb said carefully. But judging by these messages, it's not recent. And she's active. Active. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. I couldn't breathe. It was like the air in the small, cozy cabin had turned to solid stone. I need a minute, I managed to say, pushing my chair back and stumbling toward the door. Caleb didn't try to stop me. Outside, the cold, crisp mountain air slapped me across the face, but it wasn't enough to clear the storm that was raging in my mind. Bella wasn't just cheating on me. She was living a double life. A secret, sordid life, inviting strangers into the home we had built together, the space I had thought was sacred. Every memory we had shared in that house now felt tainted, poisoned, like a sick joke I hadn't been letting on. When I finally went back inside, my legs unsteady, my mind a chaotic ruin, Caleb had a beer waiting for me. I sat down, my hands trembling as I reached for it. "What do I do?" I asked, looking at him like he had all the answers. He just shook his head slowly. "First," he said, his voice calm, steady, "we figure out what's really going on. If this is just some online fantasy, or if she's actually meeting these guys. Then, we decide how you want to handle it." "How do we find out?" I asked. "You're not going to like it," he said, leaning back in his chair. "But you need proof. Real, undeniable proof. If you confront her now, she'll just deny everything, and you'll have nothing to show for it. You need to catch her in the act." The thought made me physically ill, but I knew he was right. "How?" Caleb hesitated, then said, "We'll set her up. Use her own profile against her. See if she takes the bait." The plan felt sleazy, manipulative, a step into a world of deceit I had never wanted to be a part of. But what choice did I have? If Bella had truly gone this far, then I needed to know. I needed the truth, no matter how much it hurt. And so, with Caleb's help, we crafted the first, surreal, gut-wrenching step in what would become the longest, most painful weekend of my life. Caleb and I sat there in the quiet, wood-paneled cabin, hammering out a plan I never thought I'd be a part of. My hands were still trembling as I typed on his laptop, the cursor blinking mockingly in the chat box beneath Bella's profile. It felt dirty, wrong, a profound violation of the man I thought I was. But Caleb's words stuck with me. You need proof. And damn it, he was right. We crafted a message, a piece of bait designed to appeal to the very preferences she had so brazenly outlined. Someone who fit the description she'd so bizarrely modeled after me. Tall, dark-haired, Mediterranean. It still made me feel sick, that strange, narcissistic detail. Except this time, we added the twist. The photo she wanted. We sent one of me. A cropped, slightly blurry picture from a hiking trip we'd taken a year ago. It was perfect, close enough to the description, but not so clear that it would scream my name. It didn't take long. Within the hour, a new message popped up. A reply from Bella. My chest tightened as I read the words. Asterisk, you're exactly what I was hoping for. Can you come tonight? I'll make it worth your while. Asterisk. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just words on a screen. It was a confirmation of every fear, every doubt, that had been gnawing at me. Caleb watched me like a hawk, ready to intervene if I cracked. You okay, Kyle? He asked, his voice cautious. No, I said flatly, shutting the laptop with more force than necessary. Let's go. I need to see this for myself. Whoa, slow down, Caleb said, standing and blocking my path to the door. You barge in there now, and you lose the upper hand. You need to be smart about this. Smart, I said, my voice rising. She's inviting some random guy into my house. Caleb, our house. And I'm supposed to just sit here and be okay with it? You're not supposed to be okay with it, he said firmly. You're supposed to get proof. That's what this is about, isn't it? He was right. Again. But it didn't make the situation any easier to stomach. The idea of some stranger walking through the front door I'd installed with my own 2 hands, stepping into the bed Bella and I shared, it was unbearable. But I forced myself to sit down, to listen to Caleb's plan. We drove back that night, the truck silent except for the occasional bump and rattle of the uneven country road. Caleb kept the headlights dim as we approached my neighborhood, parking a block away from the house. My heart pounded against my ribs as we walked the rest of the way, sticking to the shadows like a couple of second-rate criminals in a bad movie. The plan was simple, but nauseating. Caleb would wait in the truck while I snuck in through the back. I knew Bella often forgot to lock the back gate, a small, careless habit I used to tease her about. Sure enough, it swung open with barely a nudge. The house was dark, save for the faint, warm glow of a single light filtering through the living room curtains. I moved slowly, every nerve in my body on high alert, careful not to make a sound. My fingers brushed against the familiar, cold metal of the back door handle. It was unlocked. My stomach twisted into a tight, painful knot. She wasn't just careless. She was expecting someone. The house was eerily silent as I stepped inside, my footsteps muffled by the plush runner in the hallway. I moved through the utility room, my eyes slowly adjusting to the dim light spilling from the living room. I could hear faint laughter, a sound that felt utterly foreign, a violation in my own home. Peering around the corner of the doorway, I saw her. Bella. She was sitting on the couch, a glass of red wine in her hand, laughing at something a man sitting across from her had said. He was older than I'd imagined, with salt and pepper hair and an expensive-looking blazer, the kind of guy who screamed, asterisk, I can afford your time. Asterisk. For a moment, I froze. A primal, territorial rage washed over me. I wanted to storm in, to grab him by the collar and throw him out into the street. But I didn't. I backed away, retreating into the shadows, and made my way silently up the stairs to our bedroom. My heart was a frantic drum as I set up the first of the small, discreet cameras Caleb and I had prepared. I positioned it between a stack of books on the bookshelf, perfectly angled toward the couch below. The second one went in our bedroom, nestled among the hats on a shelf in Bella's walk-in closet. When I was sure everything was in place, I slipped back out the way I had come, my breaths coming in shallow, ragged bursts. Caleb was waiting in the truck, the engine running low. What happened? He asked, his voice a low whisper as I climbed in. She's in there, I said, my own voice a hollow, empty thing. With some guy. Caleb didn't press for details. He just put the truck in drive and pulled away, taking us to a nearby parking lot where we could sit and wait. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I didn't need to look to know it was Bella, probably texting me some sweet, innocuous message, a piece of her carefully constructed facade, while she entertained her guest. Now what? I asked finally, breaking the heavy silence. Caleb glanced at me, his expression unreadable in the dim light of the truck. Now, he said, we wait. And you get your proof. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her, laughing on that couch, her wine glass tilted in her hand. I didn't know if I'd ever be able to unsee it. But one thing was clear. This wasn't the woman I thought I knew. Not anymore. Back at Caleb's place, the walls felt like they were closing in on me. The cozy, rustic hunting cabin that had once promised a weekend of peace was now a suffocating, wood-paneled prison. My mind kept replaying the scene I had just witnessed. Bella, sitting comfortably in our living room, laughing, her face animated, alive, in a way I hadn't seen in months. The man sitting across from her wasn't just some random guy. He was a symbol, a wrecking ball that had smashed through the carefully constructed edifice of my life. I don't know what to think anymore, I said, breaking the heavy silence, my voice sounding distant, foreign, even to myself. Do you think this was the first time? Caleb leaned back in his chair, the creak of the old wood loud in the otherwise quiet room. Does it matter? He asked, his tone gentle, but firm. Once, twice, 10 times. It's still betrayal, Kyle. But it does matter, I insisted, my voice rising with a desperate, irrational need to quantify the damage. If it was just once, maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she. I stopped myself, realizing how pathetic, how foolish I sounded. Caleb sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. You're looking for reasons to excuse this, man. I get it. You want to believe there's some version of this story that doesn't end with your marriage in pieces. But you saw her profile. You saw the messages. This isn't just some drunken mistake at a party. She planned this. His words hit hard, because they were true. Bella hadn't just stumbled into infidelity. She had created a profile, uploaded pictures, and arranged dates. She had invited strangers into our home, the one place I had thought was sacred. Why? I asked, more to myself than to Caleb. Why would she do this? Was I not enough? Did I miss something? Caleb didn't answer right away. He just stared up at the ceiling, as if the answer might be written in the dark, wooden beams above us. Sometimes, it's not about you, man, he said finally. People cheat for all kinds of reasons. Boredom, attention, the thrill of it. It doesn't mean you weren't enough. It means she wasn't. His words made a kind of cold, logical sense, but they didn't feel any better. I wanted to believe that Bella wasn't some thrill seeker, some bored spouse. But how could I reconcile that with what I had seen? I grabbed the beer Caleb had set in front of me and took a long, deep sip, the bitterness of the cheap lager a perfect match for the pit in my stomach. You know what the worst part is? I said, staring at the condensation on the bottle. She didn't even try to hide it. The messages, the pictures, she left it all out there, like she didn't care if I found out. Maybe she didn't think you'd ever look, Caleb offered. Or maybe, Maybe she wanted you to find out. I frowned. Why would she want me to know? Caleb just shrugged. Guilt? A cry for help? Who knows? People are complicated. But if you're looking for logic in this mess, you're not going to find it. I didn't want to accept that. Bella had always been logical, practical. She wasn't impulsive or reckless. Not the Bella I knew, at least. But now, I had to wonder, how much of the Bella I knew was real? The hours crawled by as we tried to piece together a timeline. Caleb pulled up the screenshots he'd taken of her profile and the messages. Look at this, he said, pointing to the timestamps. Some of these go back months. Months. My stomach twisted again. This wasn't new. This wasn't a recent development. While I had been planning date nights and fixing things around the house, she had been planning this. The thought made me feel like an idiot, like I had been the last one to figure out the joke. At some point, Caleb went to bed, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the cold, accusing glow of the laptop screen. I tried to read, to watch TV, to do anything to distract myself, but nothing worked. My mind kept circling back to Bella. Her smile, her laugh, the way she used to rest her head on my shoulder after a long day. How much of that had been real? And how much of it was just a mask? By morning, I felt like I had aged a decade. Caleb found me on the porch, staring out at the woods, a cold, empty coffee cup in my hands. You're thinking too much, he said, handing me a fresh, hot mug. You're not going to figure this out overnight. Then when? I asked, my voice raw, broken. When does it stop hurting? Caleb didn't answer. He just sat down next to me on the porch steps, letting the quiet, comfortable silence stretch between us. Eventually, he spoke. You've got two choices, Kyle. You can confront her now, go in guns blazing, and let her spin whatever story she wants. Or, you can take the time to get your head straight and gather your proof. Either way, it's going to hurt. But one of those options gives you the upper hand. I nodded, not because I was convinced, but because I didn't have the energy to argue. Caleb was right. As much as I wanted to march into that house and demand answers, I needed to play this smart. For once, I had to think long-term. I finished my coffee, the bitterness lingering long after the cup was empty. The day ahead loomed like a storm cloud, and I knew it wouldn't be easy. But for now, I had one clear goal: find the truth, no matter how much it hurt. By the time Caleb and I were back on the road, heading away from the false promise of the hunting cabin and back toward the wreckage of my life, the hot, chaotic anger in my chest had started to cool, to solidify into something colder, harder. Calculation. The initial shock was wearing off, leaving room for something else. Strategy. If Bella wanted to play games, I would play to win. She might have thought she had covered her tracks, but she had underestimated one thing. I wasn't the kind of guy who left a mess unresolved. Caleb, ever the pragmatist, suggested we call an attorney. You can't go at this blind, Kyle, he said, his eyes on the road. You're already reeling. You need someone who knows how this plays out. Someone who will keep you from making a bad situation worse. I hated that he was right. My knee-jerk reaction would be to confront Bella directly, to scream, to demand answers. But that wouldn't get me anywhere. She'd spin it, deny everything, or worse, turn the conversation around, make it about me, about how I wasn't enough, about how I had failed her in some way. No, I needed someone in my corner who could outthink her. That's how I ended up in Rachel Montgomery's office later that morning. She came highly recommended by Caleb, who had used her during his own divorce. She's a shark, he'd said on the drive over. Not the warmest person you'll ever meet, but she gets results. And trust me, you'll want her on your side. Rachel Montgomery didn't look like a shark when she greeted me. She looked like someone who had just walked off the cover of Forbes magazine. A perfectly tailored suit, her dark hair swept back into a tight, severe bun, and a piercing, intelligent gaze that made you feel like she already knew everything about you. She shook my hand firmly and motioned for me to sit. So, Kyle, she said, her voice professional, but not unkind. Caleb gave me a brief rundown. Infidelity, possible misuse of marital assets, and a need for discretion. Is that accurate? Yeah, I said, clearing my throat. That about sums it up. Rachel leaned back in her chair, her arms crossed, as she studied me. Before we proceed, she said, her gaze steady, I need to ask you one very important question. What do you want out of this? Are you here to salvage the marriage, or to end it? I blinked, caught off guard by her bluntness. I don't know yet, I admitted. I mean, I love Bella. But after what I've seen, my voice trailed off. I need to know the truth. She nodded, as if she had heard the same, hesitant, heartbroken story 100 times before. The truth is a good start, she said. But let me be clear. If you decide to proceed with a divorce, you need to think strategically. You cannot afford to let your emotions drive your decisions. Infidelity cases are messy. And while the evidence you have is a good start, it's not always enough to sway the court in your favor. I glanced at Caleb, who gave me a subtle nod of encouragement. I've already started gathering evidence, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I have screenshots of her profile and some footage from the house. Rachel's eyebrows lifted slightly. Footage? From a camera I set up, I clarified. It's discreet. It captures the living room and the bedroom. Good, she said, her tone neutral, but approving. That will help us establish a timeline. But remember, the goal here is not to humiliate her. It's to protect yourself. The courts don't look kindly on revenge tactics. I'm not looking for revenge, I said quickly. I just want to make sure I'm not the one who gets screwed over. Rachel nodded again, her expression unreadable. Understood. Let's talk next steps. First, we will document everything. Texts, photos, videos, financial statements. We need to establish if there's been any misuse of joint assets. Second, you will avoid any and all direct confrontation with Bella for now. Anything you say or do could be used against you later. I felt a pang of guilt at the thought of avoiding Bella, of treating her like an adversary. But then I remembered the image of her, laughing on the couch with a stranger, and the guilt was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. And third, Rachel continued, leaning forward, her gaze intense. You will continue to gather evidence. We need to build an airtight case. We need to leave her with no room to maneuver, no room to lie. I left her office an hour later, my head spinning, but with a new, clear sense of purpose. This wasn't just about my hurt feelings anymore. This was about strategy. This was about protecting my future. This was about taking back control. The first step was Caleb's idea, a piece of psychological warfare that was both brilliant and deeply unsettling. You need to disrupt her plans, he said, as we sat in his truck outside Rachel's office. You need to make her feel unsafe, uncertain. You need to make her think you're onto her, without actually letting her know you are. That's how we came up with the idea for the prank call. That night, back at the cabin, Caleb used a burner phone to call Bella. He disguised his voice, making it sound older, more gravelly. Is Kyle there? He had asked, when she answered. No, he's not. I heard her say, her voice cautious. Who is this? Just a friend, Caleb had said. He was supposed to meet me for a drink, but he never showed. Said he was feeling sick, that he might be coming home early from his trip. Just wanted to make sure he was okay. There was a long, silent pause on the other end of the line. Then, he's fine, she said, her voice a little too high, a little too tight. He's fine. Caleb hung up, a small, grim smile on his face. There, he said. The first stone has been thrown. That night, for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of something other than pain. I felt like I was finally fighting back. The prank call was a small, petty act of sabotage, but it worked. It was a wrench thrown into the well-oiled machine of Bella's secret life. I sat with Caleb in his truck, a block away from my house, my phone open to the live feed from the cameras I had installed. The victory, if you could call it that, felt hollow, a bitter pill to swallow. This wasn't how I wanted my marriage to be, a series of strategic maneuvers and covert operations. But I couldn't let her get away with what she'd done, not without knowing the full extent of it. For the rest of the night, we monitored the cameras. True to Caleb's prediction, Bella didn't have any visitors after the call. Instead, she paced the living room, her phone clutched in her hand, her face a mask of anxious energy. She was on edge. She was worried. You did good, Caleb said, clapping me on the shoulder. Now, it's her turn to sweat. I just nodded, though the hollow feeling in my chest hadn't gone away. The truth was, this wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was about survival. My survival. And I wasn't going to let Bella destroy me without a fight. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache, not from booze, but from the sheer mental and emotional exhaustion of the last few days. The prank call had done its job, disrupting Bella's plans for the weekend, but it felt like a skirmish in a war I never wanted to be a part of. Caleb handed me a cup of black coffee as I shuffled into the kitchen. "Sleep any better?" he asked, his tone casual, as if we weren't in the middle of unraveling my entire life. "Barely," I muttered, sinking into a chair. "What's the next move?" He slid the laptop across the table toward me. "Let's see if last night's footage tells us anything." The cameras I had set up in the house had been working overnight, uploading short video clips and photos to a secure cloud server that Rachel, my new, shark-like attorney, had helped me set up. I logged in, my hands trembling slightly as I clicked on the first file. The footage started innocently enough. Bella, pacing the living room, phone in hand, occasionally glancing at the front door. She looked restless, worried. This wasn't the carefree, confident woman I had seen laughing on the couch with a stranger the night before. "She's on edge," Caleb observed, leaning over my shoulder. "Guess our little prank worked." But as the footage progressed, something shifted. Bella sat down on the couch, her thumbs flying furiously across the screen of her phone. Moments later, a new man arrived at the door. I froze, my jaw tightening as I watched her let him in. He was younger than the first guy, with a cocky grin and the overinflated physique of a gym rat. "This is sick," I muttered, my stomach churning. "She just rotates through them like it's nothing." Caleb said nothing, letting the footage speak for itself. The man stayed for about an hour before leaving, a smug smirk on his face as he walked back to his car. Bella, meanwhile, went back to pacing, her phone once again in her hand, presumably texting someone else. I scrolled through the files, each one a new, painful confirmation of what I already knew, but didn't want to face. Bella wasn't just cheating. She was meticulous about it. Different men, different times, all carefully orchestrated to avoid suspicion. And then I found it. The piece of footage that stopped me cold. It wasn't another man arriving or leaving. It was Bella, on the phone, pacing our bedroom, her voice faint but audible through the camera's microphone. I leaned in, straining to catch her words. "No, it has to be this weekend," she was saying, her tone sharp, clipped. "I don't have time to wait anymore. If it doesn't happen now, I'll find someone else who can." I frowned, glancing at Caleb. What the hell is she talking about? He just shook his head. "Keep listening." The next part made my blood run cold. "I told you it's not about him," she said, her voice a low, angry hiss. "He can't give me what I need. I just need someone who matches. Someone who looks like him. That's all." I sat back, my mind racing. "Someone who looks like me." The words echoed in my head, making my stomach churn. I replayed the footage, trying to make sense of it. Her words weren't just about infidelity. They hinted at something deeper. Something more calculated. More sinister. "Do you think?" I started, but I couldn't finish the thought. Caleb's expression had darkened. "You think she's trying to?" The pieces clicked into place, a horrifying, sickening mosaic of deceit. The emphasis on finding someone who looked like me. The frantic rush to make it happen this weekend. The years we had spent trying and failing to start a family. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "She's trying to get pregnant," I said, the words tasting like poison on my tongue. "With someone else. And pass it off as mine." Caleb didn't respond right away. He just stared at the screen, his jaw tight. "That's low," he said finally. "Even for her." The full, monstrous weight of her betrayal finally crashed down on me. This wasn't just about cheating. This wasn't just about lies. This was a level of deception, of cold, calculated cruelty, that I couldn't have even imagined. And I knew, in that moment, that there was no going back. There was no forgiveness. There was only the truth, and the reckoning that would have to follow. The revelation that Bella was trying to get pregnant with a stranger and pass the child off as my own was a new, deeper level of hell. It was a betrayal that transcended infidelity. It was a fundamental violation of our past, our present, and our future. My love for her, which had been wounded, which had been bleeding, now died. It was a clean, quiet death, leaving a cold, empty void in its place. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, a fog of cold, quiet rage. Caleb, sensing my fragile state, took over. He spent hours on the phone with Rachel, our attorney, updating her on the latest, most sinister development. "We need to escalate this," I heard him say, his voice a low, angry murmur from the other room. "This isn't just a divorce case anymore. This is something else." That evening, as the sun began to set, casting long, bloody shadows across the landscape, Caleb came to me with a new plan. Rachel agrees, he said, his face grim. We need to confront her. But not you. Not yet. We need an intermediary. Someone she trusts. Someone who can get her to confess, on the record. There was only one person who fit that description. Her older sister, Maria. Bella and Maria were close as sisters could be. They shared everything. If anyone could get through to Bella, if anyone could get her to admit the full extent of her deception, it was Maria. The problem was, I barely knew her. She lived on the other side of the country, and we had only met a handful of times at family gatherings. And she adored Bella. Convincing her that her perfect younger sister was a manipulative, deceitful monster was going to be a hard sell. But Caleb was relentless. He found her number, and after a long, tense conversation, in which he carefully, methodically, laid out the evidence we had collected, the dating profile, the messages, the footage of the men in our house, the chilling audio of her phone call, Maria, to her credit, agreed to help. She was shocked, horrified, but she was also a practical, no-nonsense woman. And the evidence, she admitted, was undeniable. The plan was simple. Maria would call Bella, under the pretense of just checking in. She would feign sympathy, sisterly concern. And then, she would gently, skillfully, guide the conversation toward the truth. Caleb and I would be listening in, the call on speaker, recording every word. The call happened the next day. I sat in Caleb's living room, my heart a frantic drum, as he dialed the number and put the phone on speaker. Bella. Maria's voice was warm, concerned. It's me. I heard you and Kyle are having a tough time. I just wanted to see how you were doing. Bella's voice, when she answered, was a choked, tearful whisper. Oh, Maria. It's a mess. I messed everything up. What happened, sweetie? Maria asked, her tone a perfect blend of sympathy and gentle prodding. Just talk to me. And Bella did. The story came pouring out, a torrent of self-pity, of excuses, of a narrative in which she was the victim, not the perpetrator. She told Maria about how lonely she had been, about how I had been so distant, so focused on my work. She told her about the men, minimizing their significance, painting them as a foolish, desperate mistake. But Maria, true to her word, didn't let her off the hook. But Bella, she said, her voice still soft, but with a new, sharp edge. I heard it was more than that. I heard you were trying to get pregnant. There was a long, silent pause on the other end of the line. When Bella finally spoke, her voice was a low, defensive hiss. Who told you that? Does it matter? Maria replied. Is it true? And then, the confession. He can't give me a child, Maria, Bella said, her voice breaking. We've tried for years. And I'm not getting any younger. I wanted a baby. And this seemed like the only way. I closed my eyes, the cold, clinical cruelty of her words a physical blow. She had reduced our shared struggle with infertility, years of pain and disappointment, to a simple, logistical problem, one that she had decided to solve with a series of anonymous, faceless strangers. So you were just going to lie to him? Maria asked, her voice now laced with a quiet, horrified disbelief. You were just going to let him raise a child that wasn't his. I thought it would be better this way, Bella sobbed. He would have the child he always wanted. We would be a family. It was for us. For us. Asterisk, I felt a bitter, humorless laugh rise in my throat. The call ended soon after that, with Maria offering a few more hollow, sisterly platitudes before hanging up. Caleb and I sat in silence for a long time after the call ended. The recording was saved. We had it. The final, undeniable, monstrous truth. Now what? I asked finally, my voice a raw, empty whisper. Caleb looked at me, his eyes hard, resolute. Now, he said, we burn it all to the ground. The final confrontation wasn't a fiery, spontaneous explosion of anger. It was a cold, calculated, and meticulously planned demolition. The evidence we had gathered, the screenshots, the video footage, the audio recordings of her confession to her sister, was an arsenal, and I was ready to go to war. I called Bella that afternoon. My voice was calm, almost detached. We need to talk, I said. I'm coming home. She sounded relieved, hopeful. Oh, Kyle, I'm so glad. I've missed you so much. The lie was so effortless, so practiced, that it no longer even angered me. It just made me feel tired. When I walked through the front door of my own home, It felt like a foreign country. Bella was waiting for me in the living room, her face a carefully constructed mask of remorseful love. She rushed to hug me, but I held up a hand, stopping her in her tracks. "Just sit down, Bella," I said, my voice quiet but firm. I didn't waste any time. I had brought Caleb's laptop with me. I placed it on the coffee table between us and opened it. "I think you should see something," I said. I started with the screenshots of her dating profile. Her face went pale, her eyes wide with a dawning, panicked horror. "Kyle, I can explain," she started, her voice a trembling, desperate whisper. "Can you?" I replied, my own voice a cold, flat thing. "Can you explain this?" I clicked to the next file, the video of the first man, the older man in the blazer, sitting on our couch, in our living room. She just stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air, but no sound came out. I kept going, a relentless, methodical presentation of her betrayal. The video of the second man, the audio of her hushed, angry phone call in the bedroom. And then, the finale, the recording of her confession to Maria. As her own voice filled the silent room, her cold, clinical explanation of her monstrous plan, she finally broke. A raw, animal sob escaped her lips, and she buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with a grief that was entirely, deservedly, her own. I let the recording play to the end. Then, I closed the laptop. The silence that followed was absolute. "This is easier," I said, my voice a low, chilling whisper, echoing her own words back at her. "That's what you said, isn't it? That this was easier than talking to me, easier than trusting me, easier than being my wife." She just sobbed, her words a garbled, incoherent mess of apologies and excuses. "I'm done, Bella," I said, standing up. "I've spoken to a lawyer. The divorce papers will be served tomorrow." Her head shot up, her face a tear-streaked ruin. "No, Kyle, please. We can fix this. I'll do anything." "There is nothing to fix," I said, my voice as cold and hard as stone. "You didn't just break our marriage. You tried to poison our entire life, our entire future, with a lie of monstrous proportions. There is no coming back from that." I walked out of the living room and went upstairs to the guest room, packing a small bag with the last of my things. I could hear her, still sobbing downstairs, the sound a distant, meaningless echo. As I walked out the front door for the last time, I didn't look back. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel anything at all. The love I had felt for her, the life we had built, it had all been a lie. And now, it was just over. The war was over. And in the cold, quiet aftermath, I was, for the first time in a very long time, finally at peace. The road ahead would be long and lonely, but it would be mine, and it would be built on a foundation of truth. The days that followed the final confrontation were a strange, hollow sort of peace. The storm had passed, leaving a quiet, desolate landscape in its wake. The divorce was a brutal, efficient affair. Rachel, my attorney, was every bit the shark Caleb had promised. Armed with the mountain of irrefutable evidence we had collected, she left Bella's legal team with no room to maneuver. Bella, to her credit, didn't fight. She signed the papers, her signature a shaky, spider-like scrawl. She walked away with her personal belongings and nothing else. The house, the savings, the life we had built, it was all mine. It felt like a hollow victory. I spent the first few weeks in a daze, going through the motions of life like an automaton. I went to work. I paid the bills. I mowed the lawn. But the house felt empty, haunted by the ghosts of a life that had been a lie. Caleb and my sister, Angela, were my anchors in the storm. They checked in on me constantly, dragging me out for beers, for dinner, for anything to get me out of the cavernous, silent house. "You've got to start living again, man," Caleb said one night, as we sat on my porch, watching the fireflies dance in the twilight. "I don't know how," I admitted, my voice a raw, honest whisper. "You just do," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "One day at a time." And he was right. Slowly, painfully, one day at a time, I began to rebuild. I started with the house. I painted the walls, getting rid of the soft, muted colors Bella had chosen, replacing them with bold, clean shades of my own. I sold the furniture we had picked out together and bought new, modern pieces that were entirely mine. I reclaimed the space, exorcising the ghosts, one room at a time. I started therapy, Not because anyone told me to, but because I knew I needed to. I needed to understand how I had been so blind. I needed to learn to trust my own instincts again. Dr. Patel was patient, insightful. "You're not responsible for her choices, Kyle," she told me during one of our sessions. "You didn't miss the signs. You just couldn't imagine a betrayal of that magnitude. And that's not a flaw. That's a testament to your own character." Her words were a balm to my wounded soul. The healing process was slow, nonlinear. There were good days, days when I felt a flicker of my old self, a glimmer of hope for the future. And there were bad days, days when the weight of the betrayal would crash down on me, leaving me breathless, lost in a sea of what-ifs and if-onlys. But slowly, the good days started to outnumber the bad. I started to rediscover the man I had been before Bella, before the lie. I went hiking, something I had always loved but had neglected in the comfortable routine of marriage. I started sketching again, filling notebooks with drawings of landscapes and cityscapes. And then, one day, I met someone. Her name was Sarah. We met at a local art fair, both of us admiring the same abstract painting. She was a landscape architect, with a quick, easy laugh and eyes that were kind and intelligent. Our conversation was easy, natural, unforced. There were no games, no pretense. It wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was a slow, gentle unfolding. A quiet, tentative exploration of a new beginning. She knew my story, the broad strokes of it, and she didn't flinch. She just listened, and she understood. One evening, as we sat on my porch, the same porch where I had sat with Caleb months before, feeling lost and broken, she took my hand. "You've been through a lot," she said, her voice soft. "I have," I said, "but I think I'm finally on the other side of it." And as I looked at her kind, honest face, I realized it was true. The storm was over. The wreckage had been cleared. And in its place, something new, something real, was finally beginning to grow.